Ahí va a llegar el gol del Arsenal. Ozil. Marca Mesut Ozil.
Pisando la pelota Nelson, a la media vuelta se vuelve a marchar Nelson, Martinelli con la pelota, el recorte de Martinelli, segundo tanto de Martinelli, segundo gol de Gabriel Martinelli.
This is Arsecast Extra.
Hello and welcome to another Arsecast Extra, as always, with James from Gunnerblog. James, whatever the French for goodly morning is. Bonjour.
Goodly morning, I think it is. I'm fluent.
Oh
Did
my
you not know?
Yeah, I didn't know that. Yeah, actually, that's not the worst French accent I've heard this weekend.
Really?
I watched this thing called King on Netflix last night. It was about Henry V and Robert Pattinson, the guy from
Twilight.
Twilight. Yeah, he was the Dauphin. And he has got this French accent that is like a cartoon chef. It's really bad. But anyway, you're in France.
I'm in France. I'm in Saint Etienne.
Ooh, what could you be doing there?
Trying to persuade William Saliba to up sticks and not change his mind. Listen, there's great things about London. Have you seen the London Eye? I'll show you that. I am here. I was here watching him last night play against AS Monaco. I was kind of hoping for an intra-Arsenal clash. I thought Cesc Fabregas might be playing for Monaco, but he wasn't involved, not in the matchday squad. But I can confirm, playing alongside Saliba, to his right, your friend of mine, Mathieu Debuchy.
Right. He's still chugging along there, is he?
He's still chugging along. He's playing as a wing-back, actually. He was one of their more attacking players, spent most of the game sort of in the final third, had to come off after about 65 minutes. He was knackered.
Right.
But yeah, Saliba doing very well. I'm here writing a piece about him, and they kept a clean sheet last night. They've had a bit of a turnaround under Claude Puel, and I mean, the best thing I can say about him really is that everyone in France is saying they sold him too soon and they sold him too cheap. So that's promising.
That is good, but it won't help us until next year at the very earliest. But
absolutely. So, if you just step away and take more of a long-term view, potentially some good news. But in the short term, it's still all bad news.
Yeah, it's been a difficult weekend. It would be fair to say difficult weekend after a difficult week for Arsenal. We needed something on Saturday against Wolves to kind of maybe restore. Not feel-good factor is not quite what I'm talking about here. Not feel-good factor, but just to sort of calm the waters a bit. We did not get that. We got another game which raises many questions, further questions about what we're doing, how we're doing it, what we're going to do in the future and everything else. I think there are some wider issues, obviously, that we'll talk about. But I guess we should start with the match itself. There was a return for Mesut Ozil, which I think people were, if not quite expecting, hopeful of because of his involvement against Liverpool and the fact that he was taken off. It strongly hinted that he would be involved in the matchday squad. But rather than play Ozil with Pepe, Aubameyang and Lacazette, he left Pepe on the bench for the entire 90 minutes. And we'll come to the substitutions a little bit later. But what do you think his reasoning was there? Is he just incapable of saying, fuck it, let's go for it. Let's really just, go for it. I'm under pressure. It would have been a win, at least for him from team selection point of view, if he'd said, this is my best front three. This is the best creative talent we have at the club, regardless of the other issues that surround him. We've got the Guendouzi-Torreira double pivot potentially that people have wanted to see. He could have given people kind of what they wanted, but somehow, whether there's something missing that we don't know in terms of information about Pepe or an injury or whatever, he just seems incapable of just going balls to the wall, for a better expression.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think any coach should set out to give people what they want, because we don't know what we're talking about, basically. But I think that he is incapable of just, taking the handbrake off, as you say. Like, I do think there is something fundamental in his makeup that he's just not a guy who can go for it, really, unless the circumstances sort of force him to. and I've said already this season that when we've been 2-0 down, it's sometimes when we've been at our best or our most free-flowing going forward because we've got no other choice. I do just think there is an inherent caution in his managerial approach. I mean, looking at the system, I'm not a huge fan of it as a system, especially with the players that we used on the day. But I suppose there is the thing of, if you've got Aubameyang and Lacazette, if he'd put Aubameyang wide, there would have been criticism of that as well. I mean, at least you get them in a front two, and they did combine for our goal. I do think it's the midfield behind that and the construction of that was more problematic. I mean, it was so narrow, and I think you can expect that when you play with a diamond. But if you've got fullbacks, if you've got Hector Bellerin, say, on the right hand side, who's a bit more penetrative going forward, it gives you a bit more width. I think so much of our build-up play came down the right and came down through Callum Chambers, and while he's a very competent player, he just can't really do what you would expect a fullback in that system to be able to do.
Yeah, okay, I get that. But is this not kind of clutching at straws a little bit, in the sense that, we're looking at, okay, maybe he can't do that, but is that really what's wrong? Is that really the problem that we have?
Well, if not that, what is it?
I think it's many things. I think it's a lot of stuff. I think it's tactical, it's formation, it's psychological at this point, I think. I just think it's but of course, like, we can't just now, because we've all decided Emery out, every game's just like, well, it was just bad because Emery. Like, there are reasons that it's not good, Yeah, and I think we have to look at them. I mean, they are his fault, a lot of them, but it's still worth talking about. No, absolutely. I guess to a certain extent, it does feel a bit redundant, though, trying to find reasons as to why things are bad with this coach, because they've been bad for quite some time now, and we've sort of exhausted all of those discussions to an extent. But when you play at home, in the kind of circumstances that we did after the week that we had with Granit Xhaka, with the situation over the captaincy, the fact that we didn't really deal with it particularly well as a club, how do you explain the start that we had to the game? Are the team inhibited? Are they cautious? Are they overly cautious? Are they nervous? Are they not confident? Because within the first 5 or 10 minutes, I think Wolves had 5 or 6 attempts on goal. They dominated the game from an early point. I think what was really interesting to me anyway was watching it and seeing Mesut Ozil drop to the edge of our own box to pick up the ball, to give us some measure of control in the game. And to be fair, it worked. As soon as he started dropping deeper to pick up the ball and to sort of provide some assurance in possession, because we hadn't had it up to them. Guendouzi was giving the ball away here, there and everywhere, and it was just not a particularly good performance from him. We got back into the game, but, it was such a bad start when you're looking for your team to sort of say, okay, come on, guys, let's get together, let's come out flying, let's really dictate this game from the very start. All of a sudden we're having to scrap our way out of our own half and into their half.
I think that is to do with system. Like, we played a formation that, when you continually change formation, I guess the price you pay is that you don't seem settled in it. And in that first 15 minutes, I agree with you, we didn't have a plan to escape. We did, or at least if we did, we weren't in any way capable of enacting it. And we were a mess, and Ozil did have to drop deep and did have to try and make things happen to try and get us back into the game. And I think that, it was unfamiliarity and lack of confidence. And I think that does come from continually trying different things, continually asking players to do jobs they're not accustomed to. And nobody looked especially comfortable, particularly in that sort of that midfield three of Torreira, Guendouzi and Ceballos.
It didn't quite function the way Emery, I guess, wanted it to function.
No, I don't think so. And that diamond system, it worked a bit last season, but it when it worked, it was almost always because of the job Aaron Ramsey did.
Yeah.
And what is quite incredible actually is if you look at our results under Emery and how they've tailed off and how they've fallen away, it coincides so dramatically with the absence of Ramsey. His presence in the team, I think, I think it's more than coincidence.
Let me just ask you about Mesut Ozil then. Do you think he carried out the role that you think Emery would have wanted him to play? Because I thought he played well against Wolves in as much as anybody played well. And was that midfield setup designed to give Ozil the freedom, as we saw earlier in the game, for him to drop deep and pick up the ball, etc.?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I said that I think Unai Emery's got that inherent cautiousness, and I feel like maybe the fact that he started Ozil in a Premier League game made him think, well, this is what I need to do with the rest of the team to accommodate that. And I do think it did bring a decent performance from Ozil. I don't think you could look at this game and blame him for anything that necessarily went wrong. But equally, it's not like we were suddenly creating a load of chances. You know, I mean, the big stat that's caught everyone's eye coming out of this match is our 10 shots, is it?
Yeah.
To Wolves is 25. I mean, that's not great at all. I don't know. What did you make of Ozil's performance?
Yeah, I thought he was good, and I thought there was a period in that first half, probably after we scored the goal, where we did have a little bit of dominance in the game. We did create some chances. I think there was a Torreira shot that was blocked. Aubameyang shot over. Lacazette had a shot with his left foot that the keeper saved, I think easily enough. He made it look a bit more difficult. Amazingly, that turned out to be our last shot on target, and that was the 32nd minute.
All our shots happened basically in that 15-minute spell, and our goal, obviously. I've got to give credit to Giant Gooner on Twitter who produced the stat that I think we generated 0.92 XG in that 15 minutes, and in the rest of the game we generated 0.12. So It was pretty dramatically skewed into that 15-minute period, in which we were kind of okay. But I did feel that we were kind of okay almost in spite of the system rather than because of it. You know, it was because Ozil was sort of making things tick. It wasn't necessarily because the shape functioned effectively well.
It is kind of the story of the season, isn't it? Where, you know, if you look at performances overall and our ability to control and dominate games is something we've talked about on the podcast, you know, more than once. We have these spells in games which look good, but do you think we try and seek encouragement or positivity from them because they sort of stand out a bit because everything else is so bad? We're looking for the good things. I mean, I agree with you. We were quite good in that little spell, but it didn't last very long. And it wasn't as if we could, you know, having scored the goal and like it was such a simple goal. You know, Luiz crossed the ball from the right-hand side. Quite what he was doing there, I can't remember. But, you know, fair play. Lacazette controls it, plays it to Aubameyang, first time into the corner or into the goal. You know, the quickness of the shot caught out the goalkeeper, and you're thinking, okay, you know, they make that look quite simple. But we are a team that's unable to build on the goals that we score. Whether it's one goal or two goals, we never seem to be able to really turn the screw.
Yeah, and a bad team can have a good spell. I mean, you can be completely outclassed over 90 minutes and still have 5 or 10 minutes that go your way in the course of any game. And, you know, we didn't take advantage of that period, but that shouldn't be the reason that we didn't win this match. We just weren't able to perform anything like well enough for anything like long enough. It was a decent goal. I mean, you know, Lacazette and Aubameyang combine, and it's a really nice finish from Aubameyang. Takes it really early on his left foot, and you kind of think, okay, we're away now. Let's see what else we can do. And we had that little 10 minutes, which I don't think we should go overboard about, but it was fine. It was acceptable. It was good enough. But our inability to maintain that is pretty damning. And Wolves really came back into the game at the end of the first half, and in the second half, genuinely, I mean, there's so little that is positive to say about Arsenal's performance, I think.
I don't think there's very much at all, to be honest. You know, again, the second half started with Wolves coming out on top and dominating the game and dominating shots. And, you know, you've already given us the 25 shots to 10 statistic, which some people will say that doesn't mean anything. You know, they only scored one goal, but, you know, when you allow the opposition that many chances, it goes back to the Watford game when we let them have 30-odd chances. You know, the odds of conceding are much higher the more often you let the opposition get a side of goal. I mean, that's fairly obvious. Yeah. What did you make of the changes? Because this is where I think we can delve into this a little bit. Lacazette for Martinelli on 60 minutes. Do we assume that there's a bit of a fitness issue there with Lacazette?
Maybe, but I would still question the identity of Martinelli coming on. I know he's been fantastic in the Cups, but, you have got Nicolas Pepe there, £75 million worth of signing, who does just appear to have turned a corner and sort of slightly found his groove. So, I thought it was a surprising change. Let's put it like that.
Okay. Particularly as you're putting on Martinelli in an unfamiliar-ish position. He was playing as one of two strikers, but playing more to the right-hand side. What struck me late in the game was Martinelli back defending in our left-back position, which I found thoroughly depressing. You've mentioned Pepe there. So Saka for Torreira.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm honest, when I look at these subs, I see a manager who seems to be protecting a point as much as going for 3 points.
Yeah.
And I know Saka is ostensibly an attacking player, but, he is someone who has played left wing back, who is defensively intense, let's put it like that. And Saka and Martinelli were a way of maintaining the press and, looking more at the defensive aspect of the game than the offensive aspect. And I think if I try and sort of second guess what Unai Emery was thinking, he probably didn't feel, and this is for my money wrong, but I imagine might have been uncomfortable with having Ozil and Pepe on the field together, because he might have been, wary of what they offer defensively. And I think that's compounded by the fact that I bet Unai Emery did not, after seeing what happened to Granit Xhaka and the reaction to all of that in the last home game, I wouldn't be surprised if he was nervous to take Mesut Ozil off for the reception he might have received.
That's a really good point. It did sort of occur to me during the game, but I forgot about it in the aftermath. And I think you might be onto something there, because had he, in a game where, particularly when Wolves had got one back and it was 1-1, had he taken off Ozil, I think it would have really gone down badly with the crowd.
So I think that impacted upon the changes he was prepared to make. If I'm honest, I think not bringing Pepe on that situation is madness, really. I really do.
Okay. I think it is too, but I also think it's madness that with 7 or 8 minutes to go, and we need a goal to win the game, that he takes off Tierney and puts on Kolasinac. And I think I said it in the blog, that is definitely the change of a manager who is afraid to lose the point he has, rather than one willing to take the risk of the risks necessary, rather, to get all 3 points. Because, maybe we're used to it from the Wenger era. Just throw on all the strikers, throw on all the forwards you can play. End up with Theo Walcott playing at right back, or Aaron Ramsey playing at right back, or whatever it might be. But you get as many attacking talents and attacking threats on the pitch, and you bombard the opposition. Maybe you can see the goal on the break, maybe. But, go for it. Have a go at taking all 3 points. And I suppose what made it more frustrating for me was that in Callum Chambers, Socrates and David Luiz, he had 3 central defenders there. He could easily have gone to a back 3 to put an extra attacking player on.
Yeah, he could. And even if he's worried about Tierney, there's no reason he can't drop Saka in there and as a kind of overlapping fullback and put an attacking player on.
Yeah.
One of the things I think that hasn't really been spoken about this season, and one of the small elements of mitigation for Emery, is there have been games where, because he's taken this stance with Ozil and he's not used him in the squad, when he's looked to make attacking changes, I have sometimes felt for him that his attacking options have been all kids. It's been Martinelli, Nelson, Willock, Saka, and that's not always ideal when you're trying to find someone to make the breakthrough to win a game. But in this match, he's got Pepe sat there. And Pepe, if this was 2 weeks ago and Pepe was still kind of struggling to find his feet, I might have a bit more sympathy for it. But given that he banged in 2 free kicks, in the Europa League, then, kicked on from that and has been basically one of our better players over the last 3 or 4 games, I just found it bewildering to not use him. And it is because he was afraid to lose. And to a certain extent, I mean, well, I think we probably would have lost, to be honest, if we'd gone for it, because we were such a mess defensively. But that shouldn't be the case. You know, that's not good enough, really. And Bernd Leno made a couple of pretty good saves in this match. I mean, it could have been worse than it was. They had a very good chance late on. Was it Jota as well who went through even so?
Yeah.
So even with those conservative switches, we were still all over the place at the back.
How many times have we said that on this podcast? Like it could have been worse. And I'm not even talking about games that we've lost or drawn. Like games that we won last season, I can distinctly remember sitting here going, wow, if they had taken their chances are we wouldn't have had 3 points there, or a win would have been a draw, or a draw would have been a loss. It's a running theme.
And look at the Villa game this season. Look at the Watford game. I mean, they both could have been worse results. We allowed too many shots. There are too many dice rolling, and eventually they'll go against you. I mean, we got a point from this game. It could have been worse than that. Undoubtedly, we could have lost this match.
It's not good, though. It's not, No.
There's nothing to celebrate.
No.
Taking that point. And we desperately needed these 3 points. I mean, I'm sure we'll come on to the league table and the implications of that. But we have dropped big points in the last week or so at home. Those Palace and Wolves games. Really, having lost at Sheffield United, having dropped points at Watford, they needed to be wins.
Well, yeah, exactly. 2 points from the last 9, and when if you're playing Chelsea, Man City, and Liverpool, you take 2 points from 9, you can maybe compartmentalize that or rationalize that, because you've picked up a couple of draws against top-level opposition, but when those 2 points have come from games, with all due respect, etc., against Sheffield United, against Crystal Palace, and against Wolves, and I'm not taking anything for granted here whatsoever. I'm fully aware of the limitations of this team, and maybe there's a recalibration needed in terms of what we can expect from fixtures like this. But I think if we work off the bigger picture of what we want Arsenal to be, and what our ambitions are and what our goals are for this season, these are games from which we should have taken far more points than we actually did. So, just another really disappointing day, disappointing performance, disappointing management. And,
it's... well, I suppose a bit of a disappointing aftermath too, in that what we've been greeted by is, noises from the club that they're not in that position, are they, where they want to make a change. And you ran a poll on Twitter which had quite staggering results, really. I mean,
yeah. It's closed now, so I must just look at the final tally here. Okay, so the poll was whether we should sack him now, whether we should give him a bit more time, or whether we should give him until the end of the season. We had a total of 59,107 votes. 87% feel that we should sack him now. 6% want to give him a bit more time, and 7%, who I assume are fans of other clubs thoroughly enjoying Arsenal's misery, want to give him until the end of the season. So that's... Now,
you didn't give him a 3-year deal option on there, Andrew. You've got to have Remain on the ballot. You know what I mean?
Oh, God, let's not. But, yeah, I mean, look, that tells you... I realise it's social media. I know it's not fully representative of all Arsenal fans, but I think across the... how many followers do I have on Twitter?
Here we go. Humble brag.
No, I just don't look. Okay, so 318,000. I reckon there's a fair representation of Arsenal fans in terms of ages, experience, demographics, football opinions, all of those things. So I think it's a pretty fair representation of certainly my followers. I can't say that it's to do with all Arsenal fans, but that's conclusive.
Number. Yeah, 60,000 is it's an Emirates Stadium worth of fans.
I was going to ask you though. I mean, you talk about noises coming from inside the club about how there's still faith in Unai Emery and what have you. How how do you view that? Because they can't be blind to what's going on the pitch, leaving aside, a Twitter poll or anything like it. They'll be aware that Arsenal have only won 6 of our last 18 Premier League games since April last year. Maybe it coincides with that Aaron Ramsey injury. Who knows?
Maybe.
But, the end of last season was bad. The start of this season has been bad. I know we're just 6 points off the top 4, but we're a third of the way through the season, and if you look at the form through a long lens, it's just a continuation of what we got last season, which ultimately left us in a position we did not want to be in, which was outside the top 4 and not in the Champions League. So do you think it's them saying the only thing they really can say publicly?
Yes, basically I do. I mean, I think I said as much last week. It is frustrating when we as fans are like, come on, a change needs to happen here. And you get briefed something like, the club are content with the way things are. They don't want to rush into anything. That is frustrating as a supporter, because you find yourself tearing your hair out, what I've got left of it, and sort of saying, what are they talking about? What progress can they see? I mean, that is just platitudes at this point. They must be aware of the wider problem, and that will be true until the day they decide it's not. Until the day they decide they're going to move Emery on, they will say something like, he's got our backing. Yeah. They're not going to turn around and say to anybody in the press, to be honest, we're thinking of letting him go. A lot rides on the Leicester game. It's sort of 50-50 for him at this point.
Yeah.
Now, I still think there is a case to be mounted that why wait at all?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't want my club to be a club that acts on the basis of a Twitter poll. Nobody wants that. We want them to reach their own objective assessment, but I can't imagine what the positive things that they see that gives them faith to wait are.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we're kicking the can down the road.
Yes.
He feels like a dead man walking. Maybe we can pull out a few more of these little metaphors between now and the end of the show. But, it does feel like delaying the inevitable when it comes to what happens next. I think you made a point to me on WhatsApp that maybe the international break is the right time, an opportune time to do it, in the sense that, okay, we've got a Europa League game in midweek, which we are, expected to win against Vitoria, even though it wasn't quite as convincing as we might have liked in the previous game against them. But then you've got a trip to Leicester. So what do you do? Do you parachute somebody into Leicester? Do you give Leicester away to your new caretaker? Or if you're promoting from within, do you make that his first game when he hasn't really had any time to prepare the team, because they'll come back from Portugal, on Thursday, blah, blah, blah. It's not a great deal of time. So it might be a case that when the international break kicks in after that Leicester game, that's the time where they might do it, because it then gives you the opportunity for somebody else to bed in and to prepare the team for the first game back after the international break, which is, can you remember off the top of your head?
Southampton at home.
Southampton at home. Okay.
Yeah, which is a quite a cushy first game for somebody potentially. I mean, I suppose I did make that point to you on WhatsApp. The only thing to say against it, well, there are two things. Number one, change it before Leicester potentially to give yourself more of a shot in that game. I mean, they are 3 points. Are they 3 points or 6 points?
No, 6 now, yeah, 6.
So it would be 9 if we lost there, which is a significant gap to overcome. The other thing is, I suppose it depends how many players actually go away, but in the international break, I suppose the theory is, you get time to work with the squad. But if a good chunk of them disappear, maybe you don't get that time. Some of them don't get back till the Friday before the Southampton game. But I think probably for the first time in a while, and I might be wrong about this, we haven't got masses of internationals in this squad as compared to sort of previous squads.
Yeah.
I think I think we've got less. So maybe it will be a bit better on that front.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, there seems to be kind of, I'm not going to say there's resistance to the idea of sacking a manager, but we've not had too much of that at Arsenal in the last 22 years.
Yeah, not a lot at all.
You know, that's not just one generation, but that's, you know, a number of generations of Arsenal fans who've grown up with this sort of idea that faith in a manager and longevity is the right way to do it. And I think if you can find a manager who can bring you success and style and trophies, you know, over a long period of time, why wouldn't anyone take that? But the reality is these days we're not appointing managers anymore. You know, we're appointing head coaches, and their life cycles are much shorter than somebody like Arsene Wenger or Alex Ferguson at Manchester United. That's the reality of the way modern football works. And, you know, clubs go through coaches, A, because, you know, they're not doing a good job, or B, you know, they go through a coach because he does a good job and a bigger club comes along and he takes him. So this is something that we're going to have to go through more than once over the next 20 or 22 years. So is that something we just have to get our heads around, that there's nothing intrinsically wrong with sacking a manager if it's going badly?
I think you're absolutely right. And I mean, look, judging by that poll, I think 90% of listeners probably agree with you. But I think that maybe why it's a bit different at Arsenal is, you know, you said something in your blog this morning that really struck a chord with me, where you said Unai Emery will be fine. Yeah. If he is sacked from Arsenal, he will be fine. And I think that's an important thing to remember. You know, we were in a situation with Arsene Wenger where I think we were so invested in him as a person and could see how dearly he loved this job that there was almost a guilt factor there. Do you know what I mean? And that's not at all to... Sounds a bit patronising, really. It's not meant to. But I can only speak for myself, but I feared for Arsene a bit. I was, you know, I was worried at times about what the future might hold for him, or how, you know, the vagaries of the fan, you know, vacillating opinion would affect him, would hurt him. And I think I you know, that sort of slightly governed how I felt about the whole thing. But this is a different situation. Unai Emery is a professional coach. He will move somewhere else and be fine. He's managed a great deal of clubs already, and there'll be plenty more. I think that was a really salient point to make, to just say, look, this is what happens in football. People get paid off and they get another job, and that's okay.
Yeah, exactly. He will be fine. Disappointed? Undoubtedly. Hurt? Perhaps. You know, but, you know, he's a professional football guy. He's been in the game for a long time. So, you know, as a player, as a coach, as a manager, he knows how it works. It's not necessarily, it's not personal. This is just about football, and it's about results. And I think, you know, he'll take some time off. He and his staff will get, you know, their contracts paid out, and he'll go back to Spain. And I think he'll get a job anywhere in Spain. You know, he's not going to get Barcelona, he's not going to get Real Madrid, and he's not going to go back to, you know, Valencia for sure. But, you know, there are clubs in Spain who will quite happily take him on, and clubs across Europe who will quite happily take him on. So I don't feel like we should feel guilty for wanting a change at Arsenal. You know, on a human level, it's sad for anybody to lose their job. But at the same time, if the job that you're doing isn't up to the standards, or isn't... if you're not achieving what you've been brought in to achieve, what's the alternative? You can't just keep giving somebody time and time and time when they're proving that, you know, that they're not up to the task. You know, he'll be fine, and we'll move on, and maybe the next guy will be the right guy, and maybe he won't be the right guy, and we will just go through this again. And I don't understand why that's really... There's nothing classless, for example, about sacking a manager. If you think that the decision is the right decision and it's the best decision for the football club, then that's what we should be concerned with. It shouldn't really bother us what happens to Unai Emery next.
No, I mean, look at Bayern Munich. They're a big club, and they've acted like a big club this morning. Was it this morning?
Yeah, somebody said to me that he resigned, but I guess it's a case that he jumped before he got pushed.
Yes, I mean, it was on the cards, irregardless. And, that shows you, they aren't afraid to make those changes happen when they need to, even when they're coming off the back of a relatively successful season. We're not coming off the back of a successful season. I agree with you. Unai would be fine. I think in his own head, he said after the Wolves game, well, it kind of went to plan, tactically. I mean, we can all take issue with that. But I think as far as he's concerned, he'll feel like, well, I was kind of doing what I set out to do, which, I mean, it's kind of bewildering. I'll tell you a weird thing about Unai Emery, which I can't believe, but his win percentage as Arsenal manager is better significantly than his win percentage with Sevilla, with Valencia, and also better significantly than the win percentages of Arsene Wenger, George Graham, and pretty much any Arsenal manager of the modern era.
But is that not because the sample size is so much smaller? George Graham was in charge for, however long he was manager for. What was it, 8 years? Arsene Wenger, 22 years. I think it's the Europa League. The Europa League, I was going to say, has definitely skewed that. I wonder what it's like in Premier League terms, the win percentage.
Yeah, fair point. But what I mean is he'll walk away being like, well, I'm still Unai Emery, I've still got this CV. Yeah. He'll pick up a job somewhere in Europe. And do you know what? He might do well in it. Sometimes there's a weird alchemy to coaches at clubs that is either right or wrong. It's clearly wrong for Emery at Arsenal. Yeah. But it's not to say it won't happen for him elsewhere.
It's the same with players as well, isn't it? You look at a player at a club sometimes and you think, what the shit is this guy doing here? And then he goes to a different club and the environment is right for him to thrive. The coach is right for him. The position he's playing in is right for him, etc., etc. Sometimes the wrong man is in the wrong place at the wrong time, and I feel kind of like that's what we are with Unai Emery. An interesting sort of sidebar to the Kovac sacking or dismissal or resignation at Bayern Munich is that there were stories about how the dressing room was not united and the players had some serious doubts over him. And over the course of the weekend, we've seen stories like that from Arsenal, that within the Arsenal dressing room there are concerns about the way Emery is, about his tactics, about the way they're set up, about how cautious we are, about the way we play, etc., etc. And I think when you start getting stories like that leaking out, I mean, there was a story last week about how some of the players were taking the mickey out of him, etc., etc. Mm-hmm. When you're hearing that kind of stuff, you're really, really, really in end game territory, because I'd liken it to, did you ever have a teacher who just could not control the classroom?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
And once students realise, like there were teachers who, when they walked into the classroom when I was in school, the minute they walked into the classroom, you shut your mouth and you were silent, because they had this air of authority and air of discipline, or you respected that teacher and you didn't want to muck around. But there were other teachers who, when they came in, would have to spend 5 minutes going, come on, guys, calm down, shut up, stop talking, take your books out. And they just could never, ever do it. And there was no way that they could ever impart any authority within the classroom, because everybody knew what kind of a character they were. Yeah. And I think that could be what's going on a bit here with Emery.
We had a teacher at school, one teacher, my friend Tom, we must have been about 16. While the teacher was talking at the front of the class, he was sat at his desk, the teacher. This boy Tom, he stood up, he walked to the front of this class, he bent over in front of the teacher and farted in his direction. And Unai Emery is very much in danger of becoming that teacher.
The Arsenal players are farting in the general direction of Unai Emery. Is that what you're saying?
I don't know. I mainly wanted to share that anecdote because I don't think I thought about it for about 20 years and it just came back to me. I think he completely got away with it. I mean, that's the thing. Once people sense an opportunity, to push the line, they will. And yeah, those stories that are coming out of the dressing room are concerning. I think as well, when you throw the sort of Granit Xhaka issue, which we've not talked about today, sort of onto the fire, that has also sparked, I think, some divisions within the dressing room. People react differently to him and his conduct in that situation. So all in all, it is a real mess, and I really do think we're talking with sort of certainty at this point about a question of when, not if, for Unai Emery. I mean, I would just be staggered. I can't think of a situation where a manager has felt, quite so embattled, and justifiably so, and come out of it. I really, really can't think of too many. The fan sentiment is so much on one side. I don't really see a way back for him. And
no.
Yeah, that kind of makes every fixture a bit of a zombie fixture until then.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Saturday against Wolves was another nail in the coffin. There's quite a lot of nails in there now. It's like,
yes.
How many more nails do we need?
I mean, how do you feel about that? Because, I think you said a few weeks ago you were ready for a change to happen. Do you empathise at all with the board's position? It strikes me that we're talking about it being fine, sack a manager, and that not necessarily being something that falls outside the values of the club. And I think most supporters understand that. It strikes me that it's the executive who really must grasp that for the change to occur. Yeah.
I suppose the one thing that we often fail to mention, and I'll hold my hands up and say I'm guilty of this, is that when we talk about Emery not being the right man, or sacking him, or bringing in somebody else, it's the who that somebody else is that becomes
True.
like kind of the irrelevant part. The first part is like, just sack him because this is not working and this is not good enough. But the reality, of course, is that you do have to have somebody to take over. And maybe that's part of what the delay is. Maybe they're sounding out some candidates in the background. Maybe they're having discussions about who they think is the right man to take us forward. And I guess we've got a question or two about this, which we can say for the second part. I just feel that we're in danger of losing points that by the end of the season we'll look back and think, fuck, we should have done something sooner.
Yeah, we're already doing that, aren't we?
Yeah.
And the Leicester game, it is a 6-pointer, really, because they appear to be very much in the race for this top four. And the results of those matches against them are going to really play a big part in determining our league position. So, they're going to let Emery go through that match. I mean, clearly from what they're saying, there's not going to be a change super imminently, as in this week. And I do wonder if we might live to regret that. Of course, you get into that mindset of anyone but Unai, and that's, who knows if a new man could come in and actually get something there. But given that you do get a bit of a bounce sometimes when you get a managerial change, it's sort of worth a shot at this point, because what we're doing at the moment just isn't working.
No, I mean, the longer it goes on, the more pressing it becomes, and the more it becomes an issue for the board. Like, at this point, it's not really on Unai Emery, is it? Because we're all, not all, okay, again, I'm not speaking on behalf of anybody, but, we know what we've got with him and what he's capable of and what he's capable of delivering. So he will continue to do that for as long as he is allowed to continue in the job. That's a reasonable assumption to make. So then the question becomes, who do you point the finger at? Do you point the finger at the guy who's doing what he does because that's who he is and that's what he does? Or do you start looking above that and say, look, you guys have got to take some of the responsibility here, because, if you keep letting him do this, then ultimately it's going to come back and bite us in the arse, next May, when we're looking up the table and thinking, fuck, we're not in the top four, and that's going to be a disaster. Because Arsenal have to finish in the top four this season.
That's it. I mean, what would it be? 4 years in the Europa League? I mean, at that point, you are financially and in terms of status a Europa League team. And that's an unpleasant prospect. I think you're absolutely right. Unai Emery is going to keep being Unai Emery. And to a certain point, I mean, you can be frustrated by that and angry about it. I get it. But he is just being who he is. Yeah. So you have to look to the people above him to intervene and make that make that change. I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because we had all the noise in the summer about the ownership and to a certain extent the executive direction with the "we care, do you" thing. And that was kind of pacified by a good summer of transfer business.
But also, can I, if you don't mind me cutting in there, also communication. There was also, whether you were on board with it or not, there was stronger communication from the owner, from Josh Kroenke, and from the club itself. So I think that as well is a factor here, because there's been radio silence from the club since the Wolves game, not even any player reaction. So people are kind of filling in the blanks a bit themselves.
True, that's a really good point. What I was going to go and say was just that the goodwill the club sort of earned themselves there is on the line here. Because actually, one of the main reasons people grew frustrated with KSE and their stewardship of the club, I think, under Arsene Wenger, is a sense that they were kind of happy for mediocre performance to persist and that they were averse to making a bold change and a bold step in a new direction. And I think if they indulge Unai Emery for too long, those accusations will swirl again. So, from their perspective, I think it is in their interests to be decisive here and to be forward-thinking. And I think very few people, even those people who might say it's not quite right to sack Emery right now, I think very few, even of them, would suggest, he's certainly the man for the future.
Yeah. Look, we've got some questions which I think kind of expand on some of the points that we've made in this and some of the other stories that have been going on over the weekend, in particular the links to the evil man. So let's take a little break here and we'll come back with the questions and more in part 2. Welcome back to the Arsecast Extra. This is part 2 of the show where we answer questions that you sent to us on Twitter at GunnerBlog and at Arseblog, also on the Arseblog Facebook page, facebook.com/the Arseblog, and on the Arseblog Discord server, which you get access to if you are an Arseblog member on Patreon, which you can be by going to patreon.com/Arseblog. We do have questions which are going to kind of continue on a theme. So do you want to go first or will I go first or...
Have you got one lined up about the nasty man? Because if so, that seems a good place to start.
Do I have one lined up about the nasty man? There were lots. I'm just trying to find one here.
Yeah.
There's a lot of like, would you take Mourinho if blah, blah, blah. There are also a lot of people who are very vehemently opposed to the idea of Jose Mourinho taking over. Let's see. Just to throw it out there, just to spark the discussion, here's Londoner _86, Jake Well on Twitter. What would you prefer, Emery for another season and a half or Mourinho? I know you don't like either. I'm all in on serial winner and defensive mastermind Jose. Get on side.
To be honest, when it comes to getting on side there, I'm going to be like Theo Walcott. I'm perennially offside.
Addy Bayor levels of offside here, yeah.
I can't get on board with it at all. While on the subject of Twitter polls, I think I put one out. I can't remember. The question was something like, would you be happy with the appointment of Jose Mourinho as Arsenal manager? And I think about 30% of respondees came back with yes. And I was shocked that was so high. I was really shocked. I kind of thought he was persona non grata at Arsenal, and that was sort of a consensus. But it's amazing what a bad run can do, I suppose.
Sure.
And like you said in part 1, we're into a place where people kind of feel like any alternative is better. But it is, of course, a false dichotomy, isn't it? We don't have to have Mourinho or Emery.
Yeah, it's weird. Like so much of the discussion this weekend it's almost like it's a binary choice. You keep Emery or you get Mourinho, as if there are no other candidates, no other options available to us, no other managers out there, who could do a job. And I think it's interesting, isn't it, that Arsenal, despite the fact that they've been officially very silent over the weekend following the Wolves, I was going to say Wolves defeat, because that's kind of what it feels like, but the Wolves draw, have been quite strongly briefing in the background against the idea that Jose Mourinho is being lined up to take the job, that he dined with Raul Sanllehi. The pictures that were doing the rounds of Mourinho at the Emirates last week, as I think we said, it's not the director's box. He was not in the director's box. He was in a private box. He was with a dark-haired man. Raul is a dark-haired man, but there are many dark-haired men out there, and it was not Raul Sanllehi. So Arsenal are very much distancing themselves from Mourinho, and of course you have to take into account where a lot of this stuff is coming from. Mourinho's PR department, in the shape of Duncan Castles, did a story in the Sunday Times from which a lot of this is coming. So it feels like it's Mourinho positioning himself or reminding people that he's out there. He's been out of work or out of a managerial job for quite a while now. So it's time to get back into the world of work again. But at least from what we can understand from the Arsenal point of view, this is not what they're considering.
Yeah, they couldn't be more sort of categorical on it. In terms of that report that they had dinner not being true, and Raul and Jose not being in contact. So I think those of us who are opposed to the idea can take a little bit of solace from that. But I do think his name being in the mix sort of raises interesting discussion of, what sort of manager should Arsenal theoretically be looking at. And I think, even if you set aside the kind of personal enmity that exists between Mourinho and Arsenal, and there are so many instances that contribute to that, the whole voyeur thing, the specialist in failure thing, he's not a character who has endeared himself to the club. Even if you set that aside, I don't think he would be the right kind of manager for this club. And I think that's because for all my criticism of Unai Emery and all my concerns about him, I actually do think that Raul, and I guess to an extent Edu, I think that the direction they're taking this club in is a positive one in terms of, making use of the academy, development of young players. And just Mourinho is not that sort of coach and never has been. So I don't see him fitting into that setup at all. No,
he doesn't really trust young players. And you look at some of the players who came through Chelsea when he was there, De Bruyne and Salah are the two very obvious ones who went away from Mourinho and came back to the Premier League and absolutely flourished. Now, maybe they were too young, maybe. But, the talent and the quality was there, and under Mourinho, Chelsea let that go. I think, the club have been very clear about what they want, and what they wanted from Unai Emery. Build on the platform that Arsene Wenger created. Stylish, attacking, exciting football. Emery referenced it himself. Arsenal are known for their style of play. If you're looking for somebody with a football philosophy to fit into that, it is not Jose Mourinho. And I think, people make the argument, well, he is a winner and he has won things. Yes, absolutely he has. There's no question he has. But in recent years, the aura that made him the so-called or the self-proclaimed special one has definitely gone. You look at what happened with Chelsea when he went back, and he was fired because they lost 9 of their first 16 matches in that last season that he had there. Manchester United, he was sacked after 7 wins in the first 17 games. That's the kind of form that he was producing at Manchester United after spending a fortune, after alienating the dressing room. He is a toxic influence within a dressing room. It does not last. The sort of hero worship that the players at Chelsea had for him in his first in his first season or his first spell there, you know, the likes of Lampard, Terry, etc., where he took that really expensively assembled squad off Ranieri, built on it and made them a superb team. There's no question about that, but he doesn't have that impact on players anymore. He doesn't have that relationship with players anymore. You look at the way things were at Real Madrid, it was toxic there. I can't speak to Inter because I can't really remember. He doesn't have the same influence that he did as a football coach. I think he's completely at odds with whatever football philosophy Arsenal have tried to put in place. And also, I think we're at a period now where as a club and as a fan base, we need some harmony, we need some unity, we need some togetherness. We need everybody pulling in the same direction. You know, in the stands, away from the stands, on the pitch, off the pitch. He's not a guy who will do that. Appointing him will cause the kind of division that we need to heal. It will just be... I just don't understand how anybody could think it would be a good idea at this moment in time for Arsenal to appoint this guy. His football is old. It's outdated. He might be a smart coach and a smart man and analyse the game well when he's sitting there in a chair on Sky Sports, but it's just not the right approach. You know, from personality-wise, football-wise, and in the very specific context that Arsenal are going to be appointing a new coach, he is just not the right guy. Will not get on board.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. I think, you know, he's had quite a toxic influence at his recent clubs, and, you know, the expenditure tends to be massive as well. It's not necessarily something we're in a position to do or should be doing at the expense of our young players. You know, if you look at when Mourinho arrived at Chelsea, it was 2004. It's a long time ago now. It's 15 years ago. And I do think, yes, he fostered an incredibly close relationship with that group of players, and I think with the players at Inter too, there was that slight sense of they would, you know, run through walls for him. But that was almost a different generation of footballers at this point. I mean, some of those players are managers now in the Premier League, and I don't think Mourinho has really managed that, you know, with this younger generation in his last couple of jobs. We've looked on at what he did at Manchester United and laughed. You know, we were saying, keep Jose in the job. We were loving the sort of toxicity, the division, the poor football they were playing. I think to wish that upon ourselves would be madness at this point. I do think that throwing his name in the mix sort of does raise an interesting sort of sidebar discussion of, given how important it is to get back into the Champions League as soon as possible, would there be merit in not necessarily Mourinho, but finding a short-term coach who, you know, was more necessarily a results guy than an identity guy to sort of get us over the line? I think that's an interesting debate because, you know, we need to get back in the Champions League, but I also agree with you. We also need someone who connects the club, joins the club up, makes it feel somewhat more harmonious. And of course, you can find a manager who does both, but that's not easy.
No, but then, you know, that's not why. That's why they're paid the big money. That's why they're paid the big money to go do it. Just while we're on this, then, because it's a sort of follow-up question. Let me have a look here and see if I can find it. It comes from Padge, who's at Padge Roar on Twitter. And he says, Brendan Rodgers, Arteta, Freddie, Henry are some options. If you could choose our next manager, who would it be? And who do you think the club will actually go for?
I mean, this is weird. This is tricky now because, I mean, so at this point, I should address the fact that only a few weeks ago, maybe a couple of months, I put the name of Ralph Hasenhüttl into the mix as Arsenal manager. Shortly before Southampton embarked on a truly diabolical run, culminating in a 9-0 home defeat to Leicester. Some would say the perfect audition, really.
So you don't want to say anyone in case you have, the curse of James.
I don't want to apply the jinx. I mean, what I would say is, I think that when you come out with an opinion like that, to a certain extent, in this situation, you have to back it. If I just say, well, I was definitely wrong, it's too much of a climb down. I think he probably is a capable coach, but obviously it isn't working for him and he's not going to be a contender. Who would be in the mix? I mean, I had this question just on one of those candidates. I'd be interested in your thoughts on it. This is from Josh, who says, he's at Josh Robinson 87. I really, really, really want Mikel Arteta. Do you think we could get him mid-season? And I would just add to that, do you think we could get him at all, given what happened last time?
Really good question. I think you've got more chance of getting someone like Mikel Arteta mid-season than you would do getting, a manager who's in situ at another club.
Right.
Because he's an assistant. I'm not saying the Pep Guardiola thing at City is coming to its end or anything like that, but he's been there for what, two years now? Is it 2.5 years as an assistant under Guardiola? I think he's probably ready in his own mind to take a job. Of course, I'm just speculating here, but you would think that given he was close to the Arsenal job 18 months ago, another 18 months of working with Pep and gaining that experience, I would suggest he's ready. I'd say he's probably gettable as well. We may have to pay, but I think that's the case if you're going to bring in any manager from any club in mid-season or who has a contract, you're going to have to pay to get that guy in. I think he would be a very interesting candidate. There was a good interview on the official website, the Arsenal website, where he talked about his football philosophy and what he would be like as a manager. And you read it and you think, man, he's saying the right things. And of course, Unai Emery said the right things when he arrived, or many of the right things. But they didn't turn out to be true. I just feel like a guy like Arteta, who's grown up in the Barcelona academy, who probably has really clear ideas about the way he wants his football team to play. He's young, he's fresh, he has new ideas. Maybe he's got new ideas, but he's at that stage of his career where he is probably ready to take a step forward. He's worked with Wenger, he's worked with Guardiola, he's worked with David Moyes, of course. I think he probably is gettable. I think he would be a very interesting candidate for the job. And we know he was really close last time around. Whether that's affected our ability to get him, whether he feels like, he doesn't want to take the job because of that. And I think, he's a well-respected Arsenal player or ex-Arsenal player, but not necessarily like what you would call a real legend. You know what I mean? He wouldn't have, which I think might be to his advantage in a way.
Right.
The Henry or Vieira or somebody like that has much more cachet as an Arsenal legend. The other thing I hear about Arteta is that, he is quite... maybe his public persona doesn't reflect it, but I believe he's a bit of a spiky character.
Yeah. Not everyone likes him.
Yeah. And I think that could be an important part of what a new coach brings in as well. Like, not everybody likes him because he doesn't want to be liked by everybody, is my read from what I've heard from people. So
yeah. Well, Pep himself is a bit like that. Very spiky and
absolutely
can be difficult.
Absolutely.
I wonder. I mean, I should just say on Arteta, there seems to be a bit of confusion about what happened with him the first time round, because there were some quotes from him that slightly muddied it. But I do think that he wanted the Arsenal job and it was not offered to him. I think he would have happily taken it. Now, the man who sort of made that decision not to offer it to him is no longer really at the club in Ivan Gazidis. So I'm not sure how big a factor that would be.
Yeah, sure.
Where it becomes interesting is if you look at that list of candidates and you start weighing up the respective merits of Arteta against, say, Freddie Ljungberg, both guys for whom it would be their first job. I mean, do you have a gut feeling between those two?
I don't really. On the basis that each of them, it will be their first job, you would say that probably Arteta's got the edge in terms of experience, and the kind of coach that he's been working for seems very compatible with the sort of football that Arsenal purport to want to play, you know. But of course, Freddie did a great job with the under-23s. He's very well liked.
He knows those players.
He knows those young players in particular. Yeah, it's a difficult one. I mean, I think if you were going to ask me right now if I could choose anyone to be the new Arsenal manager, I'd really like the guy from Ajax, as unrealistic as I think that probably is, because I see stories linking him with Bayern. But there's a guy...
Yeah,
I mean,
Ten Hag.
Yeah. I mean, how old is that guy?
49.
49, so... Right, okay. So he's done a bit before, obviously. Arteta's a bit younger. Yeah, so he was like... He managed Go Ahead Eagles.
Yeah, interestingly, it was kind of Mark Overmars who gave him his break there.
That's right, because Overmars was at Go Ahead Eagles, wasn't he?
Yeah, and then, of course, they worked together at Ajax. So had Overmars been our choice as technical director, maybe that might be more of a prospect. Obviously, we went with Edu, and, I don't think we're going to be taking Tite off Brazil. So, yeah, I am intrigued by that side of it. You know, who are the guys who are connected to Raul, to Edu? You know, Mourinho aside, that might be in contention. But that's a really good shout. I mean, that would be a fantastic appointment, if not necessarily, I don't know, especially realistic. But in a way, why not? I mean, Arsenal, are a big club. If you pay someone enough money, it's not an unattractive role.
No, absolutely not. And I think there's a need for whoever we appoint. There's probably a need, A, to be a bit brave, and also B, maybe to take a bit of a risk. Because Emery was a safety first appointment, no question about it. I think they looked at him, his track record, his ability to, win the Europa League. He did have, or has had, plenty of experience, of course. So you can understand the logic and the thinking behind that. But sometimes football clubs are rewarded for being brave. Guardiola only had a season as Barcelona's coach of Barcelona B before they gave him the job. And clubs across Europe, I think, and I think you cited Germany in particular, are taking more risks, or being a bit more adventurous, or being a bit more left field when it comes to appointing head coaches, that they will give it to a young guy who doesn't necessarily have that much experience. You've of course got to marry that with our ambition of getting top four this season, but in the absence of anything else.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, and it is hard to identify the possible replacement, and it's not our job. I do think, for me, Arteta would figure very highly on that list, just in terms of having the experience, having worked with Pep in the Premier League, having been someone who knows the club inside out, and the style of football he professes to want to play and implement. I kind of feel like if we can't get him, he's going to be the next Man City manager, and that's not a bad testament to someone's ability.
No.
So I think, he would figure very, very highly for me. Well, I mean, would you have any interest in the sort of caretaker thing of getting someone in to the end of the season? I don't know. I'm going to throw a name out, Rafa Benitez, for example. Who's someone who's got quite a good record, basically, in English football.
Yeah.
And can coach a team, but is not someone who the fans are going to necessarily embrace and is going to sort of, bring us our Arsenal back or anything like it.
I think it would probably have to be in conjunction with if it was Benitez, then you've got to future-proof it a little bit by saying, okay, it's Benitez, but we want Freddie to be your assistant, and we want him to get this experience, and we're sort of moving towards that. Now, whether Benitez would take a job in those circumstances, I don't quite know. I mean, I think at the very least he would make this team defensively more secure.
Yeah.
And that would be a significant step forward for us.
If I was interviewing, yeah, I think if I was interviewing, I know he's probably very well paid in China, to be honest, but if I was drawing up a list of candidates that I wanted to interview, I do actually think he would be on it for me, just because I've said many times the top 4 is paramount really for us, and to a certain extent, going with someone, let's say on a deal till the end of the season and then review then, who's very experienced. I don't know. I would have it on the table. I would say that. Yeah,
look, it's one of those things, isn't it, that when you put your opinion out there for a new manager, somebody's going to come along and shoot it down or poo-poo it or whatever it might be. But that's the nature of, I think, that discussion and that debate. One man's meat is another man's poison and everything else. And what we would do ultimately is irrelevant. It's we're here for entertainment purposes as much as possible, and the job is that of Raul and Edu and Josh Kroenke and Vinay and whoever else is going to be involved in this. If they do have a shortlist, it would be surprising if Benitez wasn't on it. But I do think the circumstances in which he finds himself at the moment, he's only just gone to China, hasn't he? So I think he would be a long shot.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, I mean, one can only hope that these conversations are being had behind closed doors. And to be honest, I assume they are. And I kind of assume they would be almost irrespective of what was going on. The reason we have a technical director and the reason we have a head of football is to sort of future-proof the club a bit and make sure there is a succession plan, make sure we are thinking a few years ahead. And everything we've done, in terms of promoting the young players, buying someone like Saliba who's not available until the summer, things like that suggest that sort of thinking is in place. So it would be weird and remiss if they weren't talking about coaches as part of that conversation.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, shall we have another question?
Yeah, let's.
I liked this one, by the way. It's not really one we need to answer necessarily, but from James Lowe, who said, is it time for David Luiz to start one of his famous player revolts? The job he was actually brought in to do.
The sleeper agent.
David. Yeah, I know. I mean, I suppose it is it's a funny comment, but there is a degree of truth in it, isn't it? That maybe I do feel like there is certain, I forget who said this, but someone on Twitter said, so apologies for not remembering, I have a hunch Aubameyang will decide when Arsenal get a new coach. And I do think there is almost something in that idea that, when the players start going to people above the coach and saying, look, this isn't okay, that can sometimes be the final straw.
We had a question about that actually on Discord from Emmanuel Lane, who says, we've not heard anything about Laka and Aubameyang's new contracts. Do you think the club will need to make a decision sooner rather than later? And then there was another one a bit further down. Let me see if I could find it. Yeah, from Dumbledore's Gunt. There's a name. How damaging could inaction over the manager be with Aubameyang, Lacazette contracts coming up, potential January recruitment? Insert joke here. There seem to be myriad reasons pointing to an immediate managerial change and very few benefits of inaction. So, I mean, we've talked about it from the point of view of getting into the top 4, our league form, our lack of cohesion and style and substance. But there are other issues as well that the club will have to consider.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is a huge one, the strikers. And, they have both cut slightly frustrated figures, I think, in the last few weeks. I mean, Lacazette always looks a bit frustrated, but I think even more so than usual. And if you look at their shot numbers, they're dramatically down. Aubameyang's, as compared to the first few weeks of the season, even are down. They're not getting a lot of service to thrive off. They sort of create the goal for themselves on Saturday. And, we are hearing nothing about new contracts. And that is a huge concern because Arsenal without those two, I mean, it really, really doesn't bear thinking about. As excited as we all might be about these young attacking players, we are so reliant on those two for goals. And I think someone like Aubameyang, he's one of the 5 captains. He is the talisman of the team when it comes to goal scoring. I think his opinion on the coach and the tactical setup, the preparation, the training is valuable. And I would like to think that if this gets any worse, I mean, it's almost like they need to be consulted, because if the players aren't happy, it's difficult to see how it's going to get better.
Absolutely. I mean, the opinion of players is a consideration as well. That if they feel the team is not performing to the sum of its parts, which I think is true, I think the players that we have are capable of better than we're delivering at this moment in time, and I think the players think that too. And if they have concerns about the way that they're being used, or tactics, or formations, or any of those things, you know, they're not going to get better unless those things are addressed. So, you know, we hear player power and all that kind of stuff, and it becomes a bit of a cliche. But I think in these circumstances, the people above, they need to take into account what the players are thinking. If they're all on board, if they're behind Unai Emery, then that's one thing. If they're not, though, and if it's some of the senior players that are not, you know, you remember last year, was it last year or earlier this season? There was, you know, stuff where Aubameyang liked to post on Twitter about, like, why is Lacazette out of the team? And he sort of goes, well, I don't know. You know, none of that is particularly healthy, and I'm not sure it's quite what you want your players to be doing, but you can't ignore it either.
No, absolutely. By the way, just quickly on the manager thing, we had a question here from Sam Nicol that I just wanted to read because I think it sort of summarises what we were saying maybe a bit better than either of us managed it.
Get him on the podcast.
What is the risk of being too reactionary regarding the manager? We seem to be in a state of anyone but Emery at this stage, but the next managerial decision is critical to our future. We need a new manager, but maybe the leadership team is buying time. And I have to say, I hope that is the case, really. You know, I do think that's a good point. We get into this idea of anyone but Emery, but if we get this wrong, it will damage us. You know, United appointed Moyes, and it was a poison chalice and a nightmare job and a difficult job, and he struggled and was sacked. The issue really is that they didn't respond to that appointment appropriately, and they didn't really get it right from that point on. I think we need to try and accept.
But they brought in Mourinho. They brought in the great Mourinho. What could go wrong?
Yeah. Well, Van Gaal, of course, in between as well. Yeah. But you know, I think Sam raises a really good point. You know, fortunately, we're allowed to be reactionary. We're fans, but they need to think very carefully about this because, you know, there are people like Sanyehi who were here when Emery was appointed and were involved in that interview process, and he'll have to hold his hands up and say we didn't necessarily get that right. But it's important, really important, that we get the next one right.
Have you got a question?
Have I got a question? Yes, this is a slightly different tack. This is from Christian, who's at Christian Talks. And Christian says, thoughts on Ceballos so far? He's played a lot of possible games so far, started very bright, but he practically cost us 2 games. And then he's put brackets, Liverpool penalty, Wolves not marking his opponent.
Liverpool penalty. Oh, he missed. Yeah, that's a bit harsh. I wouldn't hold that against him in a penalty shootout. That wasn't really why we lost that game. You know, that wasn't the key driver, because we had dominant or good positions in that game more than once. So I wouldn't put that on him. Yeah, certainly we didn't actually talk about the goal that Wolves scored.
No, it got lost amidst all the other chances they had.
Yeah, you know, I mean, it wasn't great. Ceballos let the guy run off him. The cross came in, and Chambers was a little too far away from his man and got out jumped for the goal. So, you know, there's some blame there for Ceballos. I think in general, he looks a nice, tidy footballer who I think he's quick and athletic enough for the Premier League, but I think he's been a bit underwhelming for me. Been a bit underwhelming.
Yeah, had he not had that Burnley performance, I wonder how different the sort of collective assessment of him might be.
Yeah.
You know? It got him a lot of goodwill early on.
It really did, yeah.
I feel like he might be slightly riding on that at this point.
Yeah, a little bit. Look, you know, there are probably reasons for that as well. You know, we talk about the collective issues that this team has, and big players are struggling to play well. So it does seem a little bit harsh to point to Ceballos and say, well, he's not playing or he's not good enough or anything like that, because, you know, it's so hard to make individual assessments when the team itself is struggling. But you know, he is only here 3 months as well, and it's a new country and it's a new language and everything else. And maybe he is taking a bit more time to adapt than we thought. But so far, he's been okay. But that's about it for me. So I wouldn't be like writing Real Madrid a check right at this moment in time. See where we are in March or April. Maybe we have a different opinion on him. But right now, he's okay. And that's kind of it.
Yeah, I think about a month ago, we got asked if we would buy him for 40 million. And I think I said, as an investment, I'd probably just do it because I think you could move him on. If you ask me now, and it shows, I suppose, how opinions vacillate, but I don't think I would do that right now. I just don't think we're seeing enough from him. And the more I see, the less convinced I am that he's the right guy. But, you know, it is difficult, as we kind of alluded to in part one, to judge individuals too much within this system, particularly in midfield, where I think, you know, we are a bit of a mess. So if there is a managerial change at some time in the next few weeks, it would be interesting to see how that might benefit him, and, you know, perhaps we'll see more from him in the second half of the campaign.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is going to be one of the remits of the new manager, is to get more out of the players that he has. You know,
sure,
but you know, I think if we can find a manager who can create a team that has some cohesion and fluency, I think you will see individual performances improve because of that as well. So I don't think it's a case that we can look at it from, okay, we need individuals to start playing better to make the team better. I think we need the team to be better and for the individuals to react within that system.
Yeah,
does that make sense?
That's fair. Yeah, definitely.
Okay, here's a question. It comes from Toby Lilyleaf on the Discord, and he says, why do you think the club posted Xhaka's statement, the original translation, in the captain's notes? Doesn't it seem odd that they did not change the translation? And there was another one here from Ram on Twitter, at RamArsenal21, who says, what do you make of Arsenal posting Xhaka's non-apology on the official matchday programme? Is it bad PR, or are we pushed to a corner to back the captain who disrespected the armband?
Well, they don't have a lot of time, I guess, between Xhaka's statement coming out and having to go to print on the programme to react. I mean, it was Friday, what was it, late Thursday night, was it, when the Xhaka statement dropped? And I imagine they go to print sort of early-ish on Friday. I mean, part of me wonders if the statement was put out in the knowledge that something had to go in the programme notes as well, if that kind of forced Xhaka's hand a little bit. Yeah, maybe. I don't know that for sure, but I suspect that might have been an influence. I was not surprised that they didn't adapt the translation, just because I've looked at it again and again, and what happens in the English translation, it feels very deliberate. The fact that he says, I'm sorry if that's what people thought. Is that what he says?
Yeah.
I don't want to misquote him, but he doesn't come close to saying that in the German. And it must be on purpose. You wouldn't add in those words and that sense unless you wanted to. And so I think people can draw their own inferences there, but it's not like they've mistranslated a word. It's like our words have been added in. I mean, I am in guesswork territory now, but, you know, it's almost as if he regards his German-speaking fans as sort of his loyal core support, hence changing his profile picture of him wearing an Arsenal kit to a Switzerland kit, and that the English language version is more targeted at English-speaking Arsenal attending fans, i.e. the fans in the stadium who he's pissed off with. I mean, that is my reading of that difference. And I don't really know how you can read it. I mean, it seems to me very deliberate.
Yeah.
And what do I think of them putting it in? I've got some sympathy with them because, like I say, they've got to turn it around. They've got to do something. But it is a slightly absurd situation we're at now. And, you know, still no word on if he's the captain. It's been more than a week. and there's no clarification offered on that. I think that is problematic.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think it was a good look, to be honest. And like you, I do have some sympathy because there's a page to fill, and I'm not sure what they could have put in there. But yeah, look, it didn't really calm the waters too much. Xhaka's statement.
Do you think he'll be involved this week? We've got 2 games, Vitória and Leicester. Vitória feels safer, you'd have to say. Like, you know, far from England, it's a game no one really cares about. Yeah,
maybe. I don't know. I mean, it really depends what's happening behind the scenes. You know,
he's training. You know,
he's training, but also he has refused to make the kind of conditional apology that Arsenal wanted him to make. Or unconditional apology, I think, that Arsenal wanted him to make. And you know, there were suggestions that he was asked to resign the captaincy. He hasn't done that. So it feels like he is, regardless of the statement coming out, still at odds with the club. And if that's the situation, then I don't really know how he can play. You know, it hasn't been dealt with particularly well. I don't think anybody's come out of this looking well. Not Xhaka. Not the club, not Emery, who's come across as sort of weak and indecisive. And from what we hear, you know, Xhaka took exception to some of the things that Emery said about how he was feeling. So it feels like there's still probably a lot bubbling under the surface that we're not aware of. But over a week later, for it not to be, if not consigned to history, something that we've moved past, is not great. It's not great, so... Yeah,
it does feel like weak management. And I have to say, you know, a lot of the conversation this week is about us looking beyond Emery and looking above Emery. And I think I would have liked to see a bit more clarity and communication and direction from those people, you know, from Edu or from Raul to sort of impose something on that situation. If Emery and Xhaka can't sort of sort it out between themselves, I think the club need to be stronger there.
Yeah. Do you think he'll play?
I think. Do I think he'll play? I think he will. I think he'll play in Portugal.
Right.
Just because they'll want to rotate the squad, and I think that he'll be part of that. And I think that, you know, it's not like playing at the Emirates Stadium where he might get a pretty tricky reception. I think they might regard it as an opportunity to sort of sneak him back in. I wouldn't be confident enough to say if they would do that at Leicester, but we do know Unai loves to pick him.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Nishant Verma says, does Ozil's performance on the weekend justify him being in the first 11? I thought he had a good match. We looked better in possession with him involved, but the output of shots remained the same while he offers less in defence than someone like Willock.
I think, again, we come back to the point about the system. Did he justify being in the team? Yeah, he played well. He played well against Liverpool. He played well against Wolves. I mean, there's a couple of things you could look at, you know, over the course of this weekend, couldn't you? You could say that, well, the addition to Ozil into the squad didn't really make us any better, nor did the absence of Granit Xhaka. You know what I mean? So leaving aside the sort of mistakes that Xhaka is... that Xhaka makes and have frustrated people, we weren't any better without Xhaka in the team, and we weren't that much better with Ozil in the team, even though I thought Ozil, as I said in the first part of the show, played a very key role in us ending that that Wolves dominance at the start of the game. And he, you know, it was basically down to him that we got back into the game and scored our goal and created the few chances that we did. So, you know, maybe it's harsh to say he didn't make us better, but over the course of 90 minutes, you know, we've ended up with a point and a 1-1 draw at home in a game that people had expected us to win. So maybe the other question is...
immediate fix.
No, maybe the other question is, you know, did his performance suggest that there was nothing at all that he could add in the previous games in which we played, in which he was not even in the squad. Whether he was starting is another question, but, why wouldn't you have him on the bench?
Well, I think in that respect, I think he did perform pretty well at the weekend, and I equally don't think it made us masses better, and I think that probably speaks more to the manager's issues and the team's broader issues than it does anything individual. But it is also kind of interesting, isn't it, that Emery has folded on his big stance of I'm not going to include Ozil. He's sacrificed that point of principle, and it hasn't bailed him out. Do you know what I mean? Like that feels pretty. Like, where do you go from there? Do you know what I mean? It's sort of like you've sort of got off your soapbox and you've folded there. Yeah,
a week ago it was a club strategy and they were strong, and this was and then a few days later you've absolutely crumbled on that. Expediency requires that you put your principles to one side because you need points. So again, it's one of those situations that doesn't reflect well on him. We've done the Ozil thing a lot, so let's finish on one slightly more positive question, and it comes from Jake on Twitter, who's at Jake Tux, and he says, trying to stay away from the obvious. Thank you, Jake. How good do you think Tierney will become? From what I've seen so far, he looks like he could be our best left back since Ashley Cole. Would you agree?
I think I probably would, actually, because we've not been blessed with... I mean, we had sort of... we had Clichy, then we had Andre Santos. Monreal, I think, was a pretty good left back. But Tierney does look excellent. I have to say... I thought he dealt very well for the most part with Adama Traoré, who is a nightmare to defend against.
Holy fuck, that guy is quick. Like, whatever about, a 100-yard race, I can't remember seeing a player so quick over 2 or 3 yards. I just can't remember anybody who you look at him and he's got the defender there and you go, he's going to push the ball to the right and he's going to try and get a cross in, but, there's no space for him to create enough room for a cross, but somehow he manages it. I mean, thankfully, what he has in speed, he kind of lacks in end product and technical ability. Yeah. But I agree with you. There were a couple of moments early on where he got roasted by Traoré, but I think it's a sign of a good player that he quite quickly learned how to defend against him. And he wasn't really that much of a threat.
And I agree. And Traoré will give a lot of teams problems this season. I mean, he is as we said, he's very quick. He's built like a bodybuilder, and he's tricky. His end product's not there. If he puts it all together, he'll be some player. But I mean, I don't know if he ever will at this stage. But Tierney dealt well with that. He wasn't as involved going forward as I might like. As I said in part one, a lot more came down Callum Chambers' side, and it's difficult to understand that, really, given how good Tierney can be going forward. The thing that I really love about Tierney, and I think I was watching a match the other day, maybe I was watching Chambers, I was thinking about how difficult it is to cross the ball well mid-sprint. It's so rare to see a player do that well. The reason players pull the ball back or fire it low across the box is because it's sort of easier to obtain a level of accuracy at speed when you're doing that, or at least get it into a dangerous area. And if you think of people who have been brilliant crossers of the ball, like a David Beckham, say, he was never really doing that at pace. He would kind of kill the ball and almost like take dead balls from that side. Tierney can really cross when he's moving at velocity, and that's a pretty unusual thing, actually, and I love that about him. So I'm really glad he's in the team. I think I can't wait to see Hector Bellerin back in there, and I wonder if this might be the week that they reintroduce him, with Leicester being such a big game. I just wonder if they'll sort of give him, 45 minutes maybe in midweek and then play him at the weekend, because I think we would need him in that match, Hector Bellerin.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. When is the Leicester game, on Saturday or Sunday?
Saturday night.
What?
And then, Victoria is Wednesday, isn't it? It's Wednesday afternoon.
Oh, it's one of those Saturday evening ones, right? Okay.
Yeah.
I thought you meant Saturday night. I was going, is there like
sorry,
an 8 o'clock kickoff on a Saturday night or something? It just,
That did happen last season, didn't it? I think for one game for someone. But it's 5:30 at Leicester.
So Wednesday to Saturday, probably if you play Bellerin on Wednesday,
risky, yeah.
I don't know that you can play him on Saturday after a cruciate injury. Other injuries, I think you can be a bit more. Take a bit more risks with players, but with cruciates, I think you've got to manage their reintroduction slowly and sensibly. As frustrating as it might be, you have to look after the long-term benefit of the player and the team. And I think at this point, I would be surprised if he was ready to play twice in a week. I mean, look, Rob Holding wasn't even on the bench on Saturday.
True.
So
if that's the case, I'm not sure if Bellerin will play at Leicester then, thinking about it. Because I sort of think if he's not sharp or ready to play Wolves, I can't see how he will be 7 days later. I don't know. Maybe it's more likely he'll play Vittoria in that case.
Yeah.
But I mean that Leicester game is ominous, I have to say.
It is a bit, but look, we can cross that bridge when we come to it.
Yes.
Let's try and end. Yeah, we'll have to, of course. Let's end on an up note, and that is the promising nature of Kieran Tierney and what he might bring to this Arsenal team. So far, so good with him. Mm-hmm. Anyway, look, we'll leave it there. You've probably got a pain au chocolat to eat and a cup of coffee to have, I guess.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Okay, well, look, as ever, thank you everyone for listening. I hope you enjoyed the show, and we will be back next Monday to talk about that ominous Leicester game. So until then, take it easy.
Bye-bye.